And the key principle in the taper is you reduce your volume, but you maintain or even increase slightly your intensity. And that's really what those are doing, those pre-race primers. It's like you're keeping that intensity up there, but you're not over stimulating, right?
Welcome to the Athlete's Compass podcast. Each week, renowned sports scientist and founder of Athletica AI, Dr. Paul Laursen, athlete, coach, and sports scientist Marjaana Rakai, and coach and cyclist Paul Warloski discuss training, racing, and improving your health and fitness. Get ready for your journey to peak performance. Hello, and welcome to the Athlete's Compass podcast, where we navigate training, fitness, and health for everyday athletes. Today, we are diving into a topic that could literally be the difference between standing on a podium or watching from the sidelines: optimal warm-ups and pre-race openers. Picture this. You've trained for months, your fitness is dialed in, but gun time comes and you feel sluggish for the first 20 minutes of the race. Sound familiar? You're not alone. Research suggests that the way we prepare our bodies in the hours before competition can create immediate performance improvements lasting up to 48 hours. We're talking about post-activation potentiation, oxygen uptake kinetics, and we'll explain what those are, and the science of priming your system without burning it out. But here's the thing. It's not a one-size-fits-all. The same warm-up that helps a crit racer might hurt an endurance gravel grinder. And a cyclist's response to high-intensity priming can be completely different than a runner's. And for some athletes, overdoing it with warm-ups can actually make them slower. So we're going beyond the old spin easy advice or swing your legs in a running race to explore what the latest science tells us about optimal preparation strategies. From the controversial 24-hour openers in the perfect race day, warm-up timing will give you the tools to fine-tune your performance when it matters most. So grab a notebook, because by the end of this episode, you're going to have a completely different approach to how you prepare for the next race. Let's find your performance edge. Paul, let's start with that post-activation potentiation, or PAP. What are we talking about?
Yeah. Hey, Paul, I think that what we're talking about is waking up. You're waking up the central nervous system at the end of the day, right? So post-activation potentiation, right? So yeah, you're activating to increase your potential ultimately at the end of the day. So and I almost kind of even thinking about from moving to me just kind of waking up here to being, going from kind of groggy Paul to a little bit more alive Paul here at 10 in the morning in where I'm at. But it's like I know I can kind of go to another level too, right? If I hop on my bike and I start doing some neuromuscular primers too. So there are these happenings that are going on inside the nervous system to be able to cause those motor units, right? And that's nervous system to muscle to fire even stronger. So that's sort of that's the first one. So when you do any of these pre-race primers, or just like like we do in velocity, where we're trying to activate the larger motor units, the fast twitch muscle fibers, by pushing into zone 6 and zone 7 just for a little bit. Even that's the central nervous system factor. But the other one that's also important is what's called the Q10 effect, and I'm not actually sure what Q10 was all about. I think it's coenzyme Q10, I believe but it's temperature driven adaptation ultimately, and that's where the whole warm-up gets its name. So actually, by being warmer, we're accelerating enzyme activity, the cross-bridge cycling in the muscles themselves, and that nerve conduction again, which kind of crosses over back to the PAP effect. So both are really important, and both principles, getting warm itself and also activating the neuromuscular system, are going to allow you to perform, like studies show you will perform at a higher level than had you not done that. And to think about even, how that might relate to you, think about where you've performed well even in races too, right? Where you've had those experiences in races where you haven't, you've kind of just due to circumstance and context, you just haven't really been able to have a good warm up. That happens often. but just even think about how that kind of feels, right? Where you almost that you're not really getting going until 10 minutes or whatever into the race because of that. So yeah, we'll start with there.
How does this relate to the openers that we do the day before an event? Is PAP just a part of warm-ups in general before our events? How does that work?
Yeah, so the PAP effect is it's more acute. So we're talking actually something that you'd be doing, within the 5 to 10 minute period beforehand, followed by a rest or recovery. That's more the PAP effect, the Q10 effect, right? Getting warm, priming the nervous system. That's what you have to think about. Now the day before or the 2 days before, where that is, I think a lot of it, if I'm honest, is kind of coming down. It's psychology, but it's keeping in the principles of taper. And the key principle in the taper is you reduce your volume, but you maintain or even increase slightly your intensity. And that's really what those are doing. Those pre-race primers. It's like you're keeping that intensity up there, but you're not over stimulating, right? So it's like yeah, and that's in a conditioned athlete that's done a lot of training for that. It doesn't even phase them, right? They can do, and especially on the bike in a concentric contracting situation, not eccentric like running, but in the concentric cycling sort of situation, like it's just you're bringing blood flow through all the large fibers. You're priming the central nervous system. You're giving yourself a little bit of a hard workout, but you're keeping the volume low. So that's context versus the context is just before the race. You're giving it a little bit of a primer to actually perform well. Not too much, but just something to say I'm warm and something to say I'm going to activate here strongly very, very, very soon. And studies have shown that if you do that, you're basically, well, we'll get to the oxygen kinetics, but that's another effect actually that happens shortly thereafter is you get more oxygen into those larger motor units too.
So if I think back, my my youth track career, we used to always watch what the top athlete were doing, and they would always wear like a tracksuit, and then they would run a little bit, do some strides and jumps, and so they were essentially doing the post activation potential
Yeah.
and the Q10. Like they always would wear tracksuits, and then when they were ready to race, they would take them off, like they were nice and warm. So
That's those are great observations. And again, there's always this branch or this slide. We go back between what's actually in the literature and the science, and then what are
mm-hmm.
people actually doing. Again, remember, it's always what people are doing that usually wins, and then us
Mm-hmm.
geeky scientists come in and try to explain it all. So you're absolutely right, though, MJ. Like wear the tracksuits. Like it's always have warm muscles. So and again, I always go back to my darling daughter Kaya, who does her swimming races. Right, like sometimes you'll go to a venue and maybe it's an outdoor race or whatever, right? And all of a sudden she's getting cold. Well, I know. Look, let's put some warm clothing over top. Just you're going to do a sprint event, whether it's 50 or 100 or 200, but it's you've got to, it's very very short window, so you want to keep those muscles as warm as they possibly can be before you're going to be going into all out mode. And we
Mm-hmm.
know started if we've ever done an all out kind of effort in a cold, if you're too cold, you can't. You actually like there's nothing in there. And so yeah, so you need that warmth for blood flow, and because the muscles themselves are going to contract at the rate that you want them to for those high
Mm-hmm.
power efforts.
So we have both kind of psychological and physical openers the day before or a couple days before, and we have the acute warm-ups that right before our event. Should athletes test their warm-ups during training, or is there a way to predict which individuals need which kind of specific protocols?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it comes with experience, honestly, but I think that's really to the heart of your question, right?
Mm-hmm.
As you become a more experienced athlete, you start to know these things. They're just part and parcel of what you do, and you'll know that you need to be warm before most races. I mean, if we're talking about a hot race in Houston, well, maybe not, right? Like it's kind of you don't have to worry about it at that point because the environment is warm already. But if you're over here in Revelstoke, where I am, where it's winter right now at the time of recording, yeah, you've got to maintain that warmth. So experience kind of helps you with these sorts of things. So context changes everything. Know that you need to be warm, but think about your environment first and foremost before you make that decision. I think that's kind of the key. There's no like one protocol, and probably also the warmer you are, the less you have to do on those primers, right? There's something that's it will come a lot easier in terms of like pushing those big powers in the warmth environment. But again, if you're in a cold environment, you might want to do a couple more because you're going to get the heat generation from the higher or like doing more of those primers. So let's take a velocity primer kind of situation. Marjaana usually does 3 for us. So if I'm doing that in a hot environment, maybe I'd only need 2 of those and I'd be ready to go. And if I'm going to be doing those outdoors in a 0-degree environment, I might need to do like 5 or 6 or 7 of those to really sort of feel I'm good to kind of go.
Mm-hmm. I would still do like in the warm environment. I think there's a little bit of a difference. Like in a warm environment, I would maybe do like a easy, steady run, much shorter than I would do in the cold environment, just to get more warm. But I would still do those primers, those short efforts, regardless of if it's cold or warm. But yeah, maybe I would shorten the steady warm up.
Yeah.
And you can, like, when you do the primers, depending what you've done, what your fatigue levels are, but like on velocity, you can kind of feel where you're at. Like the first 10 seconds is always pretty hard, but then second and third gets easier. But those are also really good gauge on like what's to come. How am I feeling today? Because some days you just carry much more fatigue.
Mm-hmm. So to talk about the day before openers, are there specific intensities and durations that work best for those day before? And should we do them the day before, or is 2 days before better?
I love doing them day before.
Yeah.
You do them day before, MJ?
Day before, yeah.
Yeah. I think either or is probably fine. I don't know if there's I think there's lots of ways to skin the cat on that. I don't know if there's, but again, that's again with the principle of taper, you want to keep the intensity maintained or heightened, and you want to reduce the volume. So you don't want to do too much on day 1 and 2 before. That's the key factor. And of course also not too much intensity too, right? But anything from like just those that like 2 minutes at VO2 kind of thing, you could do that, or even 2 by 2 at VO2, or between zone 4 and zone 5, somewhere in there. You're stimulating again the VO2 slow component, and you're trying to just increase the recruitment and the temperature and the oxygen grab at the larger motor unit level. So yeah, and again, and probably priming the central nervous system, and then it's psychological as well. It's just like it's keeping you feeling good.
That's why I love doing them the day before, because like you've had a taper and you're starting to feel, like your fatigue has dropped and your fitness form is good. And you just kind of like, I just enjoy them because they feel easy. Like
Yeah.
I usually, like if I've done things wrong, like right, I feel really good and I enjoy that feeling. But I only do like 1 or 2, like not too many, just to like, oh yeah, I'm there. Let's go.
You're ready to roll.
Yeah.
So how do we find that balance between going too hard and activation for the day befores?
A lot of it comes down to feel, and you could also potentially look a little bit at workout reserve. I was talking to Andrea about this, right, with workout reserve and how the recovery element of workout reserve. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, check this out on Athletica, where it's looking at, we've talked about it before and we've had Andrea on the podcast, but you're looking at the maximal mean powers and the window to that in terms of what your profile sits at, right? So inevitably, all of us, we get to a race and we have a profile, a power profile, a pace profile. When I say profile, I'm talking about how fast you sprint versus how long you go, and the power and the pace that's associated with each one of those, what we call maximal mean powers or maximal mean paces. And it could be 10 seconds, it could be 2 minutes, it could be 3 hours, but we all have an individual amount of a profile that we've done from our training in the past. And ultimately, that shapes the recovery curve that you have. And I was just learning about this from Andrea in the talk here just prior. And it's basically you're looking at the speed of that recovery should relate to the speed of the energy systems that are being engaged. So if you're doing those primers and they're it could be anywhere from 10 seconds to 2 minutes, they are recovering at a very fast rate. Hopefully because you've done all your training sort of behind that, and that's a really good thing. Of course, if you went into this without any training, well, they wouldn't recover very fast, right? But they should recover at the profile level that you've already prepared for. And if you're doing an Athletica program, you should have a nice mix of all those various different maximal mean, pace, and power elements. So yeah, and again, that should give you almost the confidence too that you should be able to, that you're fully recovered, because you even recover in the given session very, very quickly. And to figure this out, just do your own, go check your own power or pace profile on Athletica and have a look at how fast your workout reserve is kind of recovering thereafter. And if you do what's prescribed, which is usually between 2 to 3 of these little primers in the couple days before, then that's one little way to give you the confidence to say, oh, that was just the right amount and not too much. So you have sort of the mathematical algorithms that are behind you to give you that confidence. But otherwise, Paul, a lot of us, we're using feel too, right? Like Marjaana was kind of just describing. So you have both with Athletica.
Are there metrics that we should be looking at, heart rate kind of things, to know, do we want to get our heart rate up into that kind of race level zone? Is that a good place to go?
Totally. Yeah. And again, if you're doing like VO2 primers, you should just touch on that VO2 segment, right? On rep number 2 or 3, if you're doing 2 or 3 of these 2-minute efforts. So you should just touch on that at the end, and then you turn it off. It's like, I'm not going to do an excessive amount, but it's just enough to start breathing heavy, get the heart rate up towards 90% of max. That's great, good enough. And yeah, and like MJ was saying, it should feel easy, and that fact that it feels easy is giving you the confidence that you've done all the work. Everything that effort was like fully aerobic, which is the whole purpose of the training in the first place, right? You're doing an aerobic event, and you've trained the aerobic system optimally, and now you get to express it.
I think the biggest mistake is that people, they try to do too much the day or two before.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And we've talked about taper so many times. It can be challenging, right? Especially mentally, to just let go of the training and trust that you've done enough haze in the barn. So, I mean, like sometimes when you start feeling good, you like, oh, this feels really good. I want to do a little bit more, right? Yeah. But I think that's the biggest mistake people do, is that they train too much leading up to the race week. They are at the race venue. They are like, ready to go. They're feeling good. They see other people doing long rides. They're like, oh, I should probably do a long ride. And, it's a snowballs. So I would say, if you try to do the day before activation, practice it before your the last long weekend preparations, try it out the day before and see how that feels. But yeah, the biggest mistake is to do too many of them or too hard.
Yeah, so definitely keep it light, touch on VO2 max, and go rest. Be ready to go for the next day. That's what I'm hearing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's talk about the race day itself. When should athletes do their race day warm up relative to their start time? When should we start the work?
Depends on the race.
Yeah, I was just going to say it really depends on what kind of race you've got.
Mm-hmm. Like if you're doing a big marathon, like where there's thousands of people, it's really limited what you are able to do. I would still try to do some kind of mobility. You know, if you can run a little bit before, do that with some strides, and then get in your curl. But yeah, it's really limited. And then you have these neighborhood events where you can just park and go run, and you're at the start line. So that's when you can practice your warm ups. But what I usually do, let's say that it's a 10K run or half a marathon or something, I always try to at least do a 10-minute run and then do some strides and then do some mobility just to kind of feel, mostly probably just to feel like I'm ready and get warm. But that's about it. For marathon, I still do the same, but I try to sit down a little bit, not stress too much about running, like running warm up before.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, I kind of have the routine going. And even like before Ironman, I do run a little bit and then kind of get heart rate up and do some mobility, but mostly it's meditation.
Yeah. So I was just going to say, yeah, context is everything. So it totally depends on the race that's in front of you. So if you have a high intensity race, then you definitely want to have a high intensity primer beforehand if you can. Andy Jones has sort of shown this. We'll touch on it now, but basically, it's we're improving what's called your VO2 kinetics. And if you're in the Olympic programs and stuff, they're always looking at that ideal warm up beforehand. Think sprint cyclists, think track and field runners, right? And you're ultimately, you want that whole priming effect, that you're basically telling the cardiovascular system to deliver oxygen within that zone 4 to zone 4 and above level, right? Zone 4 to zone 5. That's all you can. That's the top cap of your cardiovascular's kind of capacity. But you almost want to push in there first. And when you do that, what winds up happening is you open up the capillaries in the sitting around the larger muscle fibers, motor units, fast twitch muscle fibers. And when you've got that larger capillarization opened up, then you're going to basically facilitate the aerobic metabolism capacity of those larger motor units, right? Fat burning, mitochondrial usage. And if you don't, again, it's back to the situation where you're almost the cold athlete, right? And you're using part of the race to get into that. You don't want to. If short duration matters and performance over that, again, I think to my daughter's sprint swimming, like she's going to be of benefit if most of that is done aerobically. Okay, so all your short distance events, 5K, and your high intensity right from the beginning, 5K run. You want that primer in there beforehand, and it needs to be ideally within the window of 5 to 10 minutes. You're still going to sort of get that potential happening with the VO2 kinetics, speeding the VO2 kinetics, turning on aerobic metabolism more earlier than anaerobic metabolism, glycolysis. So yeah, makes a difference.
Are you saying 5 to 10 minutes of total work or 5 to 10 minutes before a race starts?
5 to 10 minutes before race starts, and just like to the level of exercise, finishing at the level of exercise where you're huffing and puffing, keeping it simple, right? Because you don't worry about, you're usually too nervous and stuff to deal with heart rate and powers and paces and all that sort of thing, right? Mm-hmm. Especially at the race itself. But if it's a running race, can you find a hill that's nearby where you could run up just to get that, or could you stride out for where you're kind of reaching. You'll see runners and stuff that are doing this. Oh, why are they running so fast just beforehand? Well, they're probably a pretty elite runner. They're going to be running at the front of the pack, and they're doing that because they're well and truly trained, and they know that that's not going to damage them, but they're going to actually get back to that level really, really quick, and running the first bit in aerobic metabolism.
You can actually kind of like see this sometimes on velocity sessions. The first set is always like we're all like struggling, and like I would love to hear what people are thinking during the first set, because it's hard. And then most people, they kind of like, the second set is always like, oh yeah, here's
Totally.
my legs, right? So this is like, it's
Always.
a perfect example of how better the second set can go when you're truly warm and already reaching the VO2 max intensity.
That's right. That's right. So then let's flip the other context. Just finish this one. Like, what do I do before my race, right? So now I'm an Ironman triathlete, right? I've got a long day ahead of me, and honestly, unless I'm one of the elites, and my swim is so important for me, fine. Then no, we're kind of back to this primer sort of talk that I was chatting about, where it would be benefit to do some sprints and whatnot in the water before I have to sprint out. But if that's the majority, like that's 1% or less of the listeners here. So otherwise, it's just like you were kind of saying, MJ, meditate, chill. Yeah, it's going to be a long day out here. Let's find my position, and you just know that first little bit's going to be a little bit challenging, but you're going to move into your pace because we've got 10 hours plus to be out here, whatever it is.
Yeah, I know in the cycling capacity that there's a massive difference between what kind of warm up we need for a cyclocross race. It's going to be 30 or 45 minutes. And the cross race, we need to get our heart rate up to, race levels and be ready to go from the gun. And a gravel race, they often start fast. So you need to get a little bit of a warm up and get a little bit of a priming action in. But for the most part, you just need to warm up in the first few miles. With triathlon, does it make, and this is from my ignorance since I don't do triathlons, do we want to handle warm-ups differently if there's multiple disciplines? Do you warm up for the swim and get ready for that? You don't need to worry about the bike or the run?
You don't. No, you can't.
Yeah.
Like, the swim's going to take care of everything, right? Like it's because you're moving, you're getting warm, hopefully, unless it's a cold water swim. But I mean, man, I've had some nasty ones in my history. In my days, they didn't cancel events even if you're swimming in 10 or 11 degree water. And I had one with that, and I can just remember some people actually wore their wetsuit. They continued to wear their wetsuit on the bike phase. They were that cold.
Oh.
And they were fine. They removed their wetsuit after they finished the 40K bike in an Olympic distance triathlon. So it's like, that's how, like temperature really matters, right? And that just highlights it. So in ice cold water triathlons, you find out real quickly how much temperature matters as an effect, because the DNFs are off the chart in those situations because people can't believe how they just can't function under being so cold, being hypothermic, but you can't. So it really drives home the fact that the temperature effect is just so important for exercise.
Can we talk more about the cold water swims?
Yeah.
I was listening to Jörgen Mielau, who is the safety chief of Norsemen, and he's done some research on swimming in 10-degree water. They actually did a research study on the Oslo Fjord. I can't believe they got volunteers to show up, and they wanted to find out if 10 degrees Celsius is too cold for 3.8K swim, which is the long distance swim. And turns out, no, it's too cold. So they actually, the participants got hypothermia even with the wetsuit. So, well, some of them did. They got really, really cold. But so they determined that 10 degrees, it should be half distance swim.
Yeah.
And then they also have found that, and this is the reason why they spray in a Norseman start. So you jump off a ferry, and in the ferry, they actually spray all the participants with cold water, especially the face, because when you dive into a cold water, you get that diving reflex, and that can cause arrhythmia. So they want people rather have that diving reflex in the big ferry instead of when they jump the 5 to 6 meters down into the black, deep fjord.
Yeah.
I'm trying to hype myself for this because I will be one of those
sounds
people.
that way.
So, yeah, they spray them with the cold water, and then they need to make the jump. And some people, they decide not to jump because it's just mentally. I think it's pretty big deal. It's scary, right?
It's really scary.
So if you know you're going into a cold water, and my first Ironman was in Norway and the water was cold, I did a little bit of warm up, but still, like, I went in, started way too hard, and a few 100 meters in, I was like hyperventilating, and I'm like, what is happening? So just be mindful that you might not want to sprint in a cold water, but just like get a slow start and get warm first in the water.
Yeah. I had that experience, the cold shock, and it's real. It actually happened. So we went for a summer hike to the glaciers, and there was this beautiful, you can just imagine summer day at the top of 2,000 meters, 6,000 feet, and but it's glacier fed lake, right, where we're kind of camping. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go for a swim. I'm gonna swim to the from this side to the other side of the lake, small lake, and back. So I dove in and I just started swimming, and I got to the end, and then I started coming back, and it was just like all of a sudden it was like my body turned into cement, and I could hardly move, I could hardly kick anymore, and I could hardly move my arms, and they like basically there was like this loss of the ability, despite my desire to go as fast as I could, but my drive was just all of a sudden turned off, and it was the scariest thing because now I'm stuck in the middle of the lake in this sort of situation. And of course, my family's not going to really want to dive in and come and save me. But so I kind of flipped on my back and made sure that my airway was kind of clear, and I did a little bit of like just a sort of a slow float and backstroke the rest of the way, because I was quite alarmed that I was going to go under, sort of. But and then when I got to the end, I told my family what had happened. It was not good. Yeah,
That's
it
pretty
was,
scary.
but it was super scary. So it can happen to anyone. Being as trained as you want, if you have that, that cold shock response, is very dangerous.
Yeah, imagine like when it's 5 a.m. and it's dark in the Norwegian fjord and hundreds of people in the water. Not a good situation.
Yeah.
Wow. And when is your Norseman?
August.
Wow. Okay. Some definite training for that. That's going to be an adventure. So, should we think about caffeine intake at all? And should we think about caffeine timing? Is that something that we should, is caffeine a good tool for us at this point for warm-ups?
Drink your coffee early enough so you can use the bathroom after.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Paul, do you use caffeine before an event?
Always, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like and again, back to the central nervous system thing, right, where we started with the PAP. It's again you're again having that neuromuscular impact, right? So it's like there's like this blockage of the adenosine receptors in the brain that cause for your feeling of fatigue, so that you ultimately can't feel as much fatigue when you have those receptors blocked, and that winds up increasing central drive. So yeah, your whole nervous system fires a little bit faster. And that's I don't know what the stats are on caffeine or coffee usage in the Western world, but I would imagine they're pretty high, and that's what everyone is grabbing, that alertness, right? So I think most of us are drinking a coffee right now. I see you, Paul. And so yeah, so it's if you are not using caffeine yet in your race performance, then that's a real opportunity. Though the window is usually about an hour before is a good time. Even but 30 minutes, 30 minutes to 90 minutes is probably just a fine window anywhere in there that you can get that into you. And I can remember some of the literature on this, but they were saying that you only get so much of a caffeine hit from coffee. And there are these competing, what are called, I believe, methylxanthines, which is the molecule that winds up blocking the adenosine receptors. So you get there's a bunch of methylxanthines in coffee, but if you just want the kick and just want the pure caffeine, you should go to the pharmaceutical place that's nearby. You'll find a product like No Dose or equivalent, and it's just like pure caffeine. And they usually come in 100 milligram tablets, and you can take those. I think the maximum dose that you're going to see a benefit at is usually about 300 milligrams. So if you go beyond that, you could overwhelm the system. So I wouldn't go over that. And like the advice we give so many people so often, you don't do this for the very first time. If you know what I mean? Never tried this before. You've never had caffeine before, and now you're going to go and take 300 milligrams. You're going to just be, it's a recipe waiting, for disaster, kind of waiting to happen.
You're going to be flying instead of riding a bike
Yeah. So, you do want to kind of practice these in key sets beforehand, and start small, start with half a tablet if you've never had this before, and then try a full tablet and try two, but use these in key sets that you're doing. Key sets, we're talking about like interval training or, moderate interval or moderate intervals kind of thing, race pace kind of stuff. And then, and see if see how you feel, and see if you get a little bit of a bump in your performance. Check out your heart rate response to these as well. And yeah, there's a lot of potential there for priming the nervous system, which is what this podcast is really kind of all about.
How soon before? 30 minutes, 60 minutes before?
Yep. 30 to 60, 30 to 90 is probably a fine little window. And then it, has a half-life and drifts off sort of shortly thereafter. And then that's why, so if you're in an Ironman or a marathon, you're kind of redosing every hour or two kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do we want to give any kind of protocols, I guess, about how we do a running warm-up? If we have a short event, a 5K, what should we do?
So I start with maybe 5-10 minute, just an easy jog. Then I'll do some squats, some lunges, some leg swings, some light body weight strength training, just like one set of 10 repeats. I like to do like this lunge matrix, which is forward lunges, sideways lunges, and back lunges. And then I finish off with a little bit more jog and 3 to 4 strides. And maybe a 1 or 2 a little bit longer, like 1 or 2 at the race, 1 or 2 minutes at the race pace, depending on the race and where I am. But that is usually also what I use on everyday running. Like I try to do some, combined strength and mobility moves, and then I start slowly running.
And the only one I would add on that and I've seen this in runners, some great. We have a great photo, actually, one of our athletic athletes doing this on the line, and it's actually so if you're stood on that line waiting for the gun, you can actually do some counter movement jumps, almost like some maximal jumps, just to kind of prime the nervous system. There is another good one, just to keep if you have to like sprint from the get-go in a 5K to maybe get your position on say it's a cross-country race or whatever. So that's just some counter movement jumps is another good one.
Yeah.
This is just jumping in place.
Yeah.
Basically.
Okay. Yeah. You'll see, and if you watch track and field events too, you'll see you'll see track and field athletes that are doing the same.
What about long distance marathon? Basically the same thing, a little bit less.
Yeah.
Yeah, not as important, right? But maybe if you're elite, then maybe getting that position off the start is. So, but yeah, and you'll see like you go to big event 10Ks and stuff in the cities. You'll see athletes. They'll sort of have their place where they can kind of do their primers right off the front, and they're like avoiding one another and stuff because they're kind of doing it in both directions before they heading straight down the main central road around the big buildings and whatnot, the tight sort of space. But that's what they're trying to do. So I don't think I think like we always say with training, there's more than one ways to skin the cat with this, but the principles are really quite simple at the end of the day. And the number one is like get that PAP effect where it's like some sort of essential nervous system primer. And we've given you all these various different examples and way to do that. Number two, be warm. That's a really, really key one. If you're not warm, the whole system from central nervous system to nerves to the muscles themselves are not going to contract optimally to what you're wanting. And then number three, if you can also get a little bit more aerobic metabolism involved, is the the whole VO2 kinetics. So can you just get to that VO2 max state around 5 to 10 minutes beforehand? That's going to be like icing on the cake, because now all of a sudden the whole system is kind of primed for aerobic metabolism, and you'll slow down the anaerobic metabolism off the gun. So you're going to be kicking goals with that. And maybe last but not least is more icing on the cake might be optimizing the caffeine intake too. So
that's a good place to stop. We are going to include some studies in the show notes. So take a look at those if you want to dig in a little bit more deeply into the whole picture. Marjaana, anything else you want to add?
Well, I just remembered that our friend Cindy always says she needs longer warm up, which I don't know any studies per se, but as we get older, we might need a little bit longer than 10 minutes of warm up.
Oh yeah, I'll give you one last anecdote. If you are an elite, and again, Cindy is getting fitter and fitter and fitter. It's just incredible to watch her progress. Remember when she started in Athletica, she was really not doing too much, and now she's top in her age group. And again, like so many of the examples, it's if you're patient, you will eventually make patient and consistent, you make good progress year after year. But the on the long warm up, I'm thinking back to the work I did in the Australian Olympic program, and I could remember I'll name him out is Michael Rogers, and he was just a fantastic cyclist in the Tour de France and Australia's top time trialer for a long time, and he was doing warm-ups minimum of 90 minutes. Like they wouldn't even show up if he wasn't going to be doing a 90-minute warm-up out on his bike before he was going to kind of do a time trial, right? Someone at the top of the game would be doing that, going that long, right? Imagine, right? But if it's an aerobically demanding kind of sport, and an 8-hour day is just a part of the job, then doing 90 minutes beforehand is relative is to him is quite low. So everything, as we always say here, is relative. Like that might be not you at all. The listener probably isn't, but that's how long it could potentially be. And probably the fitter that you get, the longer ideal warm up you're going to want for yourself. To Cindy's point.
Interesting. I thought that would be maybe a perimenopausal thing, wanting a little bit more time on aerobic intensity to warm up.
Well,
the young bunnies can do it, like crank out like from 5 minutes on.
Yeah, maybe. But I would just say I think it relates to just how fit Cindy is.
Yeah.
Like she's,
Okay.
yeah, I see how much she's training, and just, yeah, she's just incredible.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for listening today to the Athletes Compass podcast. Take a moment now, subscribe, share, and let's keep navigating this endurance adventure together. Improve your training with the science-based training platform Athletica, and join the conversation at the Athletica Forum. For Marjaana Rakai and Dr. Paul Laursen, I'm Paul Warloski, and this has been the Athletes Compass podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Athletes Compass podcast, your North Star through the sometimes complicated world of training for your endurance sport. We appreciate your comments and training questions and your 5-star reviews. For a deeper dive into the science of endurance sports, listen to the Training Science podcast and check out the adaptive AI training platform Athletica.ai. Thanks for listening.